Okay, uh, you can find any source of zoology you find in internet or as a book. Even these old classical sources from the 19th century. Again, you have to have basic knowledge of zoology, and it's for now it's enough uh, for vets. But it will be very good for you if you begin working, for example, in some of the national parks or reservations as a vet, and it will be very important to know the diversity of the animals there. A little bit about the history of zoology. There are some which are important to know. Firstly, Carlos Linnaeus. I told you about the systematics and systematic position of the species when I showed you the structure of the presentation. This is the founder of the modern taxonomy, Carlos Linnaeus, a Swedish scientist. Physician and zoologist, he found that the different animals are organized in species, and the species are organized in larger groups like families, orders, and other. You will see in the next lectures. And Charles Darwin, who is not only the father of the evolutionary theory, he made in the first ecological studies when the expedition of the Beagle ship in which he took part began. They were going into the Atlantic Ocean, and he didn't have any work because he was the biologist of the expedition, and this expedition was aimed. It was geographical expedition, military also, to map the south shores of South America. And they needed a biologist, and had this young Charles Darwin there. He was about 20 years old. So they were passing through the Atlantic Ocean, and as I said, he didn't have any work, and asked the person who repairs the stuff on the ship to make him a big net and to tie this net with a long rope. And with this net, he threw this net in the water and let the ship drag this net for a while. And he collected the, the net and saw that this net was full of living organisms. This is the first ecological study because he collected a group of uh, species which are belonging to one ecological group. These were the so-called pelagic organisms, the plankton and the nekton. The plankton are the small organisms which are dependent on the moving of the water, of the waves and the currents. And the nekton are the moving organisms, larger, like fish, for example, or some squids, pelagic squids, which can fight against the currents and waves and can move independently. Of course, a lot of interesting new species he found, and you know, in the Galapagos archipelago, the idea that uh, separate populations evolved, emerged. This theory is the basics of the modern evolutionary theory. The theory of Darwin, and Darwin itself said that if he had one more life, he will rewrite his theory. And now, so many years after this idea, it is developed, and the modern evolutionary theory is digging into the molecules. So on molecular level, we are studying the changes which are going not through specimens, individuals, through populations. You have to know that the single thing which evolves in the nature is not the single organism. This is the population. The population is evolving, not the organism. So I think it's enough for this. I can tell you an example. I studied different groups of animals, but one of these groups are very small cave-dwelling snails. They are living in subterranean waters. And I found some new species of science and even genera from the part of North Bulgaria. And I only supposed about their origin because during about 8 million years ago, it was flooded by sea. So I suppose that they are living in cave underground waters. I suppose that they have sea origin from this sea, but it was only supposition, nothing more. Later, I had materials, some specimens in ethanol, and I contacted with some Polish scientists which are working, they are making DNA analysis, and they make something which I, I don't understand very well, but it is called the so-called molecular clock. And they set this molecular clock and found by this methodology that these species really begin to separate each other about 7.5 million years ago. The period when this sea flew out of this area, it was very dry. Here on Balkans, it was the so-called Messinian crisis during Miocene, and it was something like the African savanna. So it's very interesting, very complicated, and not very popular. Other scientists from the time of Darwin, Alfred Russel Wallace. He was a Scottish Scotsman who worked mainly in the jungles of Indonesia and Malaysia. A lot of terrain work, studying a lot of species, and he also, simultaneously with Darwin, understood that the populations are changing because he was working on other archipelago. This is the islands of Java, Borneo, and other in Indonesia and Malaysia, and found that the species distribution is different. There is one line in this archipelago in where species are more related to the Australia and New Guinea, and the other group of the islands, they were related to Asia. He wrote a very short paper about this article. I think scientific popular, not clearly scientific, popular article. And Darwin saw this article and became ill because he was working on evolutionary theory 20 years. And Sir Alfred Russel Wallace just make an idea of this and wrote a few sentences. They contacted each other. Wallace said to Darwin, of course, it's your work, 20 years of work. I do not want to steal it from you. just publish it, no problems. He published, of course, Darwin his work, and they become also good friends, exchanging a lot, mails, and this theory now is called Darwin-Wallace theory. And this line in the Malaysian archipelago is called the Wallace line. Gerald Darrow, the founder of the modern conservation of the species, especially conservation of the species in zoos in captivity. He is also a writer who wrote a lot of books. I grew up with these books. Sorry? I grew up with these books. The first book in my life, I was about 10 years of age when I read the book My Family and Other Animals, in which Gerald Darrow talks about his childhood in Corfu Island, Kerkyra, in Greece. Because he is British, but is born in India, because his father was working there as engineer about the railways. But after the death of his father, their mother, with they were 4 children, are going to Greece in a peaceful place in the Corfu Island, and he grew up there. He was lucky that his teacher was Theodoros Stefanidis, one of the big scientists on Corfu and also teacher. He was private teacher of Gerald Darrow. When I was on Corfu, I was also working on these snails, as I said, and I found papers of Theodoros Stefanidis, and I cite the scientist in my scientific paper for the snails and the small invertebrates of Corfu Island. So about Gerald Darrow, he has a zoo. Now he is not passed away in 1995, but he has a so-called Darrow Trust, and he's working for conservation all over the world. They have this zoo in the Jersey Island, which is close to the French shores. They are in La Manche Channel, and they are breeding rare animals and releasing their offspring back into the wild. Also, they have some centers in the world where they are working locally. For example, on Mauritius Island, they are working there to conserve the rare Mauritian kestrel, a species of pigeon. There. Here is Gerald Darrow, and it's a bit older age. A lot of books again and about his expeditions in the tropical areas. In Africa, in Eastern Africa, in Cameroon, 2 expeditions in Cameroon, a lot of expeditions in South America, especially in Argentina, Uruguay, and collecting rare species. Sir David Attenborough, I think he's alive and well, and it's a national treasure for Britain. He was a friend of Gerald Darrow, and again, conservationist and explaining very good, very understandable also the evolutionary theory, the modern evolutionary theory. A lot of scientific popular movies by the BBC. I also recommend his books. His newest book is about the conservation of the earth. And here is here with Cape Flawless Otter, I think. So, what is the hierarchy? What is the systematic? Very roughly explained. Firstly, it's the life, as we know it. Life, the organic matter. Second is domain. So you can imagine a planet. Here, it's the planet Earth. But possibly, life occurs in other planets of our solar system. For sure, it occurs outside of our solar system, but also inside of our solar system. Maybe you know that soon scientists found water even on the moon, on Mars. For example, in the deep cave systems of Mars, the life is quite expected. Also, in Venus, in the gas atmosphere of Venus, it is supposed that there is life, something like the algae or something. Also, there are some satellites of the big planets, like the satellite Europe of Jupiter. Again, place where life is supposed to occur. So these are different domains, if we imagine that there is life there. Kingdoms are the biggest groups of organisms which have some similarity to each other. And here, there's a lot of theories about the number of kingdoms and why they are divided like this. But here, we will accept a simple number of 5 kingdoms. And these kingdoms are the kingdom of animals, kingdom of plants, kingdom of fungi, or you know the mushrooms, the fruiting bodies of the fungi. Kingdom of the single-celled animals. Single-celled animals with a nucleus, eukaryotic. Eukaryotic means that they have a nucleus inside of the cell. And the 5th kingdom is the kingdom of the bacterias or prokaryotic animals. They are not animals, prokaryotic organisms. And their DNA is not organized in a nucleus. It's roughly said floating in the cytoplasm. Kingdoms are organized in phylums. Phylums in classes, classes in orders, orders in families, families in genera, and the genera are consisted of species. So each species has only one name, and it's its Latin name. The Latin and the ancient Greek are accepted for names of species or any structures in the science. Other names are called common names. They are specific for each country, for each language, even for each country part. You can call an animal different ways. For example, in Bulgaria, we have a variety of names about some wildlife. So, to be unified, the Latin is accepted, and again, the ancient Greek. Combination of both. But it's accepted to be said Latin. And each species has a binomial name. It means that firstly is the name of the genus, and the second is the specific species name. Like our humans, we are Homo sapiens. This is genus Homo sapiens, is our species name. For example, the dog, genus name is Canis, species name is Familiaris. The wolf, Canis lupus. Canis aureus is the golden giant. And the fox is Vulpes vulpes. So these two genera are organized in the family Canidae, or dogs. Genus Canis and genus Vulpes. Vulpes the fox, Vulpes vulpes. Okay, I explained this, so I will not repeat this also. I thought various classification types in the eukaryotic single-celled organisms. You'll accept only these are some variations.